So, this is the Aston Martin dashboard that I've been working on for a guy. He, I believe, is restoring the car. It's a project I thought would be a fun project, so I picked it up because I didn't really know what kind of work would be entailed in it. But it has been kind of a cool project. It looks kind of bad at the moment, but I'll explain why in a sec. Basically, it was kind of an experiment at first of figuring out what the right products to use would be. I first started off because this is actually, it's going to look jerpy on the underside, but this is actually an aluminum plate, and that was how it came to me. And I re-veneered it as well. I used walnut burl veneer, which is, I believe, that's the only thing I could tell was the original one. The original I peeled off, and it appeared to be a kind of sun-faded walnut burl. So walnut burl is what I went with, and this has kind of been an experimental thing for me so far. I had some issues, but all in all, it's been going pretty well. It's taken a while. That's about it. Basically, the steps I've gone through so far are, of course, adhering the veneer onto the aluminum plate. I've had to do that a few times because of different things going wrong. The adhesive I ended up settling on was a polyurethane adhesive. It's just kind of easy because it's quick drying, and I had to do several iterations of this. So that wasn't the first thing I tried. First thing I tried was straight up Type-On cold press, which is a veneer adhesive. Now, it says on the cold press bottle, I believe it's ideal for obviously wood and just porous surfaces. Wasn't sure if aluminum qualified as a porous surface, so I didn't do that. Polyurethane glue is what I ended up going with. As far as the top coat, first thing I tried was General Finishes water-based exterior 450. Now the actual solids in that are an acrylic. I'm not the biggest fan of an acrylic, but I figured of acrylic finishes in general, but I figured I'd try it on this. So I did, and I didn't like the consistency of it afterwards. And it's kind of what I've run into in the past with acrylic top coats. They feel kind of like soft and spongy to me, which is fine. I mean, if it's not something that's going to be touched, no one will ever really know what the surface texture is like. I just don't like the way it feels. I like urethanes. I like very hard top coats, and acrylic has never been one that has worked out that way for me. Someone else may have a different experience, but it's never been as hard as a urethane or some other products. So I didn't end up using urethane on this. I actually ended up using a gloss spar varnish. Spar varnish was definitely harder than the acrylic, but still not sure that it's quite as on the level I in my experience I've had urethanes become. So it's definitely doing better though, and I really like the finish. I'm really glad I did it because it's oil-based too instead of water-based, and on the walnut burl you kind of got to go oil-based. The water-based just didn't really lend any significant pop in the way of the wood grain, and on something like a burl, especially something that's a kind of a display piece in a handmade car, I mean, I feel like you should highlight the wood. So that's what I ended up using as a top coat. Now, I went through many steps trying to get the application of the spar varnish right. I started off actually spraying it with an HVLP. It's not ideal to spray spar varnish, but I figured I'd try it, so I did, and it actually worked okay. But I was very hesitant to put any significant amount on because I had ran into issues with it not curing properly when I put on, applied a little bit too heavy of a coating. So I started spraying lighter coats, and it just wasn't building right. That wasn't working out for me, and cure time, it's long with spar varnish. I mean, you definitely have to give it at least 24 hours for it to cure up. So Then I decided to experiment with another product during that time called Japan Dryer. And Japan Dryer was something I haven't used before, but I love the stuff. It's probably mainly just because I'm impatient and I do a lot of oil-based top coats. Basically what Japan Dryer is an agent you can add into your oil-based top coats, and it will significantly, in my opinion, speed up the cure time. And I have had no issues using it yet. I definitely put in more than I should have, and that may or may not come back to haunt me. I don't know yet, but it has definitely made an improvement in the dry time. And I mean, it's basically like a water-based dry time now. Very nice. So I added that into the spar varnish. Works great. Where I'm at now, I've built up the top coat quite a bit, put quite a few coatings on, and I'm just starting to sand, which is why you've got these, faded areas. It's just from the sanding. Basically, where I'm at now, I've applied veneer several times, and I've top coated the veneer, the dash, several times. And the things I've run into are, number one, in a couple areas, like over here and down here on the bottom bar. I've had multiple times where I've sanded very gently, by the way, not anything super coarse, very fine, gentle. Sanded through the top coat multiple times, which A, means I probably didn't apply enough those times, but B, also, because it happened in the exact same spots multiple times, I finally settled on it must just be a high spot in the aluminum, and that makes sense. It might have warped slightly because I did try to apply heat to it to remove a contact adhesive that was on there and some other stuff. It very likely was to have warped. So I figured I definitely need to build up the top coat more, which I've done this time. I still don't know if it's built enough, but I figure I'm just experimenting here, so I'm going to have to try sanding it and see how it goes. I'd actually sanded straight through to the aluminum in those areas multiple times, and it happened again before I applied these coatings. Now, what I ended up doing to solve this problem was using a gel stain, actually. By the way, I don't think I had mentioned it, spar varnish is a marine coating, and that, from everything I gather, is the best way to go for something like a car dash, barring some sort of industrial coating. The marine coatings are UV resistant. It's going to be in a car. The original one was faded by the sun, so I definitely figured that was the way to go. But it's not in constant exposure to elements. There are going to be plenty of significant temperature changes. I just figured spar varnish would be a good one to try at least, so I did, and it's worked out well so far. Anyway, back to the gel stain. On those areas of exposed aluminum, I used a General Finishes Java gel stain and I kind of did it between coats. And the cool thing about gel stains is you can actually apply them over top coats because they're such heavy bodied pigments, and that I just kind of thought, how am I going to cover up these areas? I tried acrylic paint in some spots, and that worked okay, but in little tiny areas where there were like voids in the veneer, I settled on the Java, and the Java looks great. I mean, it just looks like a dark part of the walnut, which is fine because there's plenty of natural dark parts to the walnut. It blended really well, I think. It still hasn't been polished yet, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, that's where I'm at. So I've built up the top coat, and now I'm getting ready to sand, and then if sanding goes well, then I'll move on to the polishing stage, and hopefully that'll go well too. So that's what you're about to see.